Thanks for listening to the Lunch and Learn with Dr. Barry, here to help educate, motivate, and put you on the right path to take control of your health through weekly discussions on topics in the medical field, public health arena, and in your community. And now your host, Dr. Barry.
And welcome to another episode of the Lunch and Learn with Dr. Barry. I am your host, Dr. Barry Pierre, your favorite board-certified internist, founder of drbarrypierre.com, as well as the CEO of Pierre Medical Consulting, helping you empower yourself for better health with the #1 podcast for patient advocacy, affirmation, and education. This week, we are talking about a very important topic. This is actually one I've been wanting to get off my chest for so long, right? So we are talking about what to do when your doctor gets sued, right? So I am going to be kind of going through my personal journey of my first lawsuit, right? Which is something that I didn't think I would ever have to even formulate in a sentence, me being sued, but it happened, right? And again, it's been like a year and a half long journey of kind of dealing with the aspect of being sued, dealing with the prospect of going through a deposition and, whatnot. And first of all, I'm glad that's over, and I just can't wait to kind of talk to you guys about it, just really to kind of get my thoughts off of what it meant to be sued and, what it means, especially for not only patients, but also my other physician colleagues when we talk about this aspect of getting sued as a physician. So make sure you send this out to, again, 5-10 of your friends. Let them know this is definitely an episode that they're going to want to keep an eye on, especially if they've always had that question, is my doctor still a good doctor if they get sued? Today's podcast is sponsored by the Lunch and Learn Community Merchandise Store, living out the motto, empower yourself for better health. And for the thanks of being a devoted podcast listener, I'm going to give you opportunity to save 10% off today's purchase using the coupon code EMPOWER10. Go to shop.drbarrypierre.com. Use the coupon code EMPOWER10, all one word. You'll save 10% off your entire purchase. Remember, 50% of all proceeds are donated to the 5-Star Scholarship Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization giving out scholarships for high school students. Today, we are going to be talking about a very important, very serious topic. And this is one where I never thought I would have to talk about this, anytime soon. But the time is near, right? So we're going to be talking about what to do when your doctor gets sued, right? This is an important question because I get this a lot, especially from patients when they are doing their searching for a new doctor, right? When they're looking for a new doctor to figure out who should I go to. A lot of times when they're doing their Googling, they always want to know how many times has this doctor been sued, right? And my question always is does it matter, right? And this question hits home more personally now than ever has been before. Because now I am on the side of a doctor who has been sued, right? So yeah, we are going to get very personal. We're going to be talking to them. And I'm so glad I'm actually able to kind of talk about the case now. It's been over a year and some change since I got sued. And obviously, while the case is kind of going on, you can't really say anything because obviously you don't want to do anything that may jeopardize the case. So, I did it. But now that it's kind of all said and done with, now I can talk. Now I'm a little bit more free. But I want to kind of talk about, what were my initial kind of thoughts, when I first got sued, what was I thinking, what was kind of going on in the mind, and more importantly, after kind of all said and done, what is up next for me, yours truly. So I want to give a kind of quick recap, and just so we can kind of get some background information, right? So a Medscape study was done and interviewed doctors from all kinds of specialties. But the question was have you ever been sued? And interesting enough, 60% of those who responded to this Medscape survey had been sued at least once. And if the doctors were at least 60 years or older, that number increased to 80%. So unfortunately, and again, I didn't know this, being sued as a physician is very common, right? And we understand, right? We take malpractice insurance just like when we take car insurance, just in case we get into an accident, we take malpractice insurance just in case someone wants to sue us, right? If something happens and someone wants to sue us, they have the right and we are protected. So I just want to kind of give a quick little recap of what happened, right? So I remember I was doing my typical daily rounds at the hospital. And one of our hospital administrators stopped me and said, "Hey, Dr. Pierre, I have this envelope for you. It looks like you've been served," right? Because not only was the patient suing me, but the patient was suing the hospital, ER doctor, a whole bunch of people were being sued. I just happened to be one of the doctors also being sued. And it was a patient I was primarily taking care of. And I remember when I saw the patient's name and started going over the case, like I remembered the patient like it was yesterday, which of course sounds crazy because as a hospital physician, I've probably taken care of thousands of patients, right? Easily thousands of patients in my, just in my lifetime span at Wellington, like not including my whole time as a physician. I've taken care of thousands of patients. But as I'm going through the case, like I remember this case specifically, one, because I remember having to convince the patient not to leave. Right? Like, so imagine, fast forward, again, this is a patient I took care of like almost 5 years ago. So imagine having to fast forward 5 years down the line and a patient that you had to beg to stay is now suing you. I mean, what can you do, right? But again, whatever the reason is behind, why they decided to wait 5 years, really not here or there. But like, I remember like that first kind of jolt, like, oh my God, like I'm getting sued. Like, what does this mean? And of course, as, we physicians, we're all hyperbolists. Like we're thinking like, all right, am I going to be able to practice anymore? Am I going to be able to practice? Like, do I have to quit? Like, what's going to happen to my career? Because again, I've never been sued, right? And I get this lawsuit and I don't know what the next step is. Now, fortunately, and again, it definitely took some time. It took some consulting and counseling from my malpractice lawyer, who I will definitely put his information in the description because he's an amazing lawyer. Because it took some counseling to kind of figure out, to kind of get over the process of the fact that I was actually being sued. And, while we kind of go through kind of the initial stages, right? So the initial stages of, yes, you're getting sued as a physician. And again, I want to kind of caveat, as a physician, we're taught, and I've said this before, that we almost have to be perfect, right? Because we understand that if we are not perfect, someone may not go home, right? Like that is a real life, scenario that occurs in our daily practice. If we are not perfect, someone's not going home, right? Some family member is not going to be able to go home if you make a mistake. So kind of carrying that level of burden, I think, has been one of the biggest stressors for physicians, kind of worldwide, down to medical students, down to pre, like just that level of stress that perfection is what we always was assumed was the standard. And I remember first talking to the lawyer and he was telling me like, first things first, right? Let's break up like this mental block that you have that you had to be perfect. Right. Which talking to the doctor, like that's almost like blasphemy, right? Like you are not required and you are not expected to be perfect, right? You are just expected to do the best that you can do for your patient, right? Like, and that took some time to the point where, and I didn't even realize this, like during my, preparation for my deposition, which is essentially me telling my side of the story, like they had to have another lawyer who was essentially trained on preparing doctors like me who really never been sued, to prepare for giving their statement. Because again, which is a whole nother, discussion that we can have. So my first session with this consultant, who was also a lawyer as well, had nothing to do with the case. It was always the fact on getting me over the mindset that me being sued does not make me a lesser physician, despite what someone on the other side, and of course this is the person's lawyer on the other side, may be saying, right? Despite, and not even lawyer, because typically, especially in these malpractice cases, there's usually other doctors on the other side saying like, oh yeah, if that was me, I would have did it this way, right? Like, so you have colleagues, right? People who are also in your field say like, yeah, I definitely would have did something different, right? So again, so now I'm having to combat other colleagues on top of lawyers, on top of this patient who, again, I haven't seen in 4+ years, right? Say that like, oh, something you did 4+ years, caused a mistake, right? Like, which again, that's one thing that I had to remember, that we weren't necessarily here to kind of argue the facts of whether I did something or I didn't do something. I just needed to argue whether what I did was the best for my patient at that time. right? And so as I'm going through the process of, learning how to be deposed, right? Because and that's a whole another, again, it was a very interesting process as a physician, because as a physician, we are primarily taught to listen and kind of answer questions appropriately. But when you're going through the deposition, especially from a legal standpoint, the big thing they say is no, answer questions, but answer it in a way that you already answered 2 or 3 questions that may come after your question, right? It's just a very weird process. Like, obviously we see it on TV, but when we have to do it like in live, it was definitely, that took like a day or so just to kind of get over that mindset. And so, but once I kind of got over that process, right? Once I got over first the mindset of, yes, I'm being sued, but I'm still a great physician. Yes, I'm being sued, but that doesn't mean I made a mistake. Yes, I'm being sued, and that doesn't mean that I need to change what I'm doing for my patients moving forward, right? Like almost like a weight was kind of lifted off my shoulders, right? Because again, I remember I was asking questions like, will I be able to practice again? Will hospitals like I was just asking all these random questions because I just figured like, oh, if you get sued, there she wrote. So I can tell you it was definitely a lesson for me, right? Understanding that, especially at my young age, and the fact that I'm still going to be taking care of quite a few patients in my career, that it's not something that I can and will be fearful of, right? Like I just can't do it, right? Like I can't operate or change my scope of practice, right? Based on, if someone decides to sue me, right? Like I just have to be fortunate enough to say that as long as I'm practicing medicine the way I'm supposed to be practicing, everything will be okay, right? And again, as a physician, is definitely something. Again, this is an experience that I've definitely had to kind of, even educate my other colleagues as well too, just so they can kind of understand. Because again, you definitely will be kind of stage shock in the beginning, right? Like, oh my God, I got sued, right? Like it's definitely something that can shock you in the beginning, but it's more important for the lesson, right? Because like now I know, like, yes, I can get sued and it still doesn't make me a bad physician, right? Yes, I can get sued and I can still practice medicine the way I need to practice, right? And because again, and I've said this before, right? Like when I was talking to the lawyer, I think a lot of, unfortunately, what kind of drove, even me being sued is just kind of the visibility, right? Again, this is a patient, again, I haven't seen in 5+ years. For all I know, this patient has watched one of my videos, has listened to a podcast. I don't know. So again, that's just, again, obviously, like I said, I hear in the legal community, like my goal is obviously to kind of educate on health, but we're trying to get the full encompassment of kind of what's going on right here in healthcare, here with myself, Dr. Barry, right? And I figure like there's no way I can get sued and not necessarily talk about it or just educate the lunch learning community, right? Because one, right, I don't want, right, this situation, right, especially if you're a lunch learning listeners, right, and I don't want you to see this, right, and say like, all right, my doctor got sued one time, like they can't be a good doctor, because clearly that's not the case, right? Like that's just not the case. I don't want you saying like, oh, if my doctor is being sued, like I don't want to see him, right? Because clearly, like I said, the Medscape survey said like 60% of physicians have been sued at least once, right? So you get to the point where you're not going to have too many physicians to go to. And, to my physician colleagues, healthcare colleagues out here, I also want you to understand that like, even though we may get sued, right? Like we still have like again, like this one person sues me, but I've taken care of tens of thousands of patients, right? So like I can't allow what one person may think about my care for them specifically, cloud what I need to do for the 10,000 other patients I'm taking care of and taking care of very well, right? So again, I'm yours truly, Dr. Barry Pierre. I'm gonna see you guys next week. Thank you for coming to the end of the episode. It is yours truly, Dr. Pierre Pierre. I want to give my undying thanks to you for your support. Just getting to the end of the episode means that you at least enjoyed today's episode. Hope you were empowered by today's episode. Please remember to share this episode with at least 2 people that you know that would be greatly affected if they did not listen to today's episode. And if you have not already done so, subscribe to the podcast. Leave us a 5-star review, especially on Apple Podcasts or wherever you can leave a review. Leave a review there because your support is so valuable for what we're doing here on the Lunch, Learn, and Everything with Pierre Medical Consulting. And if you have not done so, go ahead and join the listserv. To join the listserv is very easy. Just grab your phone right now. I'll pause. Join the listserv. You want to text Lunch, Learn, Pod. This is all going to be one word, Lunch, Learn, Pod, to 44222. And you'll be on the listserv. You'll know exactly when new episodes are coming out. You'll know about new episodes before they actually come out, because I usually tell my listserv members, hey, this is what I'm working on. These are the guests that you should expect to hear for the week on. Thanks, guys. You have a blessed day, and I'm going to see you guys next week.